Εκπαίδευση, η οποία εντάσσεται ως συνέχεια του διεθνούς συνεδρίου World Alliance for Art and Education με τίτλο Dialogues, Creativities and Collaboration in Art Education, που διοργανώνει το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών και το Τμήμα Θεατρικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, θα προσφωνήσει το μέλος του Συμβουλίου Διοίκησης του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, καθηγητής Αχιλλέας Χαλδεάκης.
Αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, κυρίες και κύριοι, φίλες και φίλοι, είμαι ιδιαίτερα ευτυχής που έχω αυτήν την θαυμάσια ευκαιρία απόψε να χαιρετίζω την επίσημη έναρξη αυτής της Διημερίδας. Και το πράττω ως φίλος και συνάδελφος, ως μέλος του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, αλλά και ως μέλος του Συμβουλίου Διοίκησης του Πανεπιστημίου μας. Γι' αυτό είναι ιδιαίτερη συγκίνησή μου να απευθύνομαι σε ομότεχνους φίλους και αγαπητούς συναδέλφους με αυτήν την λαμπρή ευκαιρία. Γιατί, αγαπητές και αγαπητοί, τα δύο τμήματά μας, δύο τμήματα για τα οποία καυχόμεθα και επιτρέψτε μου να το πω, παρότι είμαι μέλος του ενός εκ των δύο τμήματων, το Τμήμα Θεατρικών Σπουδών και το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών, που αμφότερα ανήκουν στη Φιλοσοφική Σχολή του Πανεπιστημίου μας, του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών. Το γνωρίζετε λοιπόν όλοι ότι αυτά τα δύο τμήματα είχαν τον πρωταγωνιστικό ρόλο στην 10η Διεθνή Σύνοδο της Παγκόσμιας Συμμαχίας για τις Τέχνες στην Εκπαίδευση, που πραγματοποιήθηκε ακριβώς εδώ, στο Πανεπιστήμιό μας, στην Αθήνα, στην Ελλάδα, μεταξύ 17 και 19 Οκτωβρίου του 2024, με τίτλο «Τέχνες, φύση, τεχνολογία, εκπαίδευση, αρμονία σε ενότητα». Η Παγκόσμια Συμμαχία για τις Τέχνες στην Εκπαίδευση, χωρίς να κομίζω γλάφκα εις Αθήνας, θέλω να επισημάνω έτσι για την ιστορία και το επίσημο του πράγματος ότι είναι ένα δίκτυο 4 οργανισμών της Διεθνούς Ένωσης για το Θέατρο Δράμα στην Εκπαίδευση, της Διεθνούς Ένωσης για την Εκπαίδευση μέσω της Τέχνης, της Διεθνούς Ένωσης για τη Μουσική Εκπαίδευση και της Παγκόσμιας Συμμαχίας για τον Χορό. Είναι δηλαδή, με άλλα λόγια, μια ισχυρή φωνή υπεράσπισης, δικτύωσης και έρευνας που την έχουμε απόλυτη ανάγκη. Ιδίως εμείς, οι παρικούντες και λαμβάνοντες εμπειρία της τρέχουσας ελλαδικής συγκυρίας, της τόσο κρίσιμης για τα ζητήματα της τριτοβάθμιας καλλιτεχνικής εκπαίδευσης. Βέβαια, η Παγκόσμια Συμμαχία για τις Τέχνες στην Εκπαίδευση αναφέρεται στην καλλιτεχνική εκπαίδευση συλλήβδην, στην καλλιτεχνική εκπαίδευση για όλους τους μαθητές, σε όλες τις ηλικίες, τόσο σε τυπικά όσο και σε μη τυπικά μαθησιακά περιβάλλοντα, δρώντας ως ενωμένη δύναμη που λειτουργεί αρμονικά προς όφελος της καλλιτεχνικής εκπαιδευτικής πράξης. Και ερχόμαστε, αγαπητές και αγαπητοί, απόψε εδώ, 1,5 χρόνο μετά το παραπάνω Διεθνές Συνέδριο των Τεχνών, όπου και πάλι τα δύο τμήματά μας, τα προαναφερθέντα, το Τμήμα Θεατρικών Σπουδών και το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, πρωτοστατούν για μια ακόμη φορά και μάλιστα με την συνεργασία των προγραμμάτων μεταπτυχιακών σπουδών Ελληνικό και Παγκόσμιο Θέατρο, Δραματουργία, Παράσταση, Εκπαίδευση του Τμήματος Θεατρικών Σπουδών και Μουσική Εκπαίδευση σε τυπικά και άτυπα περιβάλλοντα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, συνδιοργανώνουν με τη συνδρομή και άλλων φορέων που θα ακουστούν αναλυτικά στη συνέχεια, συνδιοργανώνουν λέγω την παρούσα βιωματική διημερίδα για τις τέχνες στην εκπαίδευση με τίτλο Dialogues, creativities and collaborations in arts education. Με επίκεντρο τη σημασία της έρευνας που βασίζεται στις τέχνες στην εκπαίδευση. Η διημερίδα αυτή φιλοδοξεί να αποτελέσει ένα δυναμικό χώρο συνάντησης και δημιουργικού διαλόγου. Ερευνητές, εκπαιδευτικοί και καλλιτέχνες που μετέχουν σε μεταπτυχιακά και διδακτορικά προγράμματα σπουδών για τις τέχνες στην εκπαίδευση. Όλες και όλοι εσείς, καθώς και άλλοι συνάδελφοι που λαμβάνουν ενεργό μέρος σε ερευνητικές δράσεις, καλείστε να συνομιλήσετε, να ανταλλάξετε ιδέες και να μοιραστείτε πρακτικές που αναδεικνύουν την καλλιτεχνική πράξη ως ερευνητική μεθοδολογία και πεδίο παραγωγής γνώσης. Αγαπητές και αγαπητοί, εκ μέρους του Συμβουλίου Διοίκησης του Πανεπιστημίου μας, αλλά και της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής, όπου τα δύο τμήματα αναπτύσσουν τις πολυσχεδείς δράσεις τους, απευθύνουμε την ευαρέσκεια και τον δίκαιο έπαινο προς όλους όσοι μόχθησαν για το σχεδιασμό και την οργάνωση αυτής της διημερίδας. Ιδιαίτερη αναφοράς μου επιτραπεί να επιχειρήσω στις αγαπητές συναδέλφους Σμαρό Χρυσοστόμου και Κλειό Φανουράκη, που αναμφίβολα βρίσκονται στον πυρήνα αυτής της προσπάθειας, μιας προσπάθειας όχι όψιμης, αλλά από καιρού εφήμως ήδη γνωστής στα μέλη του Ιδρύματός μας. Μιας προσπάθειας, η ακαδημαϊκή καρπή της οποίας, καρπή διεπιστημονική και διακαλλιτεχνική, είναι όχι μόνον πρωτοποριακή και επιδραστική, αλλά και δημιουργικά εξωστρεφής, υποστηρίζοντας αυτήν την τάση, αυτή τη διάθεση, αυτή τη φιλοδοξία που το Πανεπιστήμιό μας δυναμικά προωθεί το τελευταίο χρονικό διάστημα. Επαναλαμβάνω ότι χαίρω και επιχαίρω που συνάδελφοι από το τμήμα, οι προαναφερθείς συνάδελφοι που είναι επικεφαλής και ομίλου άλλων αξίων συναδέλφων, έθνης των συναδελφισών που συγκροτούν την Οργανωτική Επιτροπή, της Ήλιας της Λακίδου, της Αγγελικής Τριανταφυλάκη, της Έλσας της Παρακάκη, αλλά και μιας δυναμικής, δημιουργικής, πραγματικά ονειρικής ομάδας συνεργατών που αποτελείται όχι μόνο από συναδέλφους, αλλά κυρίως και από φοιτητές, προπτυχιακούς, μεταπτυχιακούς, διδακτορικούς, οργανώνουν δράσεις σαν την παρούσα που μας συνάζουν όλους εδώ και ζούμε, συνδημιουργούμε καλλιτεχνικά αποτελέσματα που έχουν άμεση αντανάκλαση στην εκπαίδευση και είναι προφανές ότι τα αποτελέσματα αυτής της διημερίδας τα αναμένει το Πανεπιστήμιό μας με μεγάλη ανυπομονησία. Εύχομαι κάθε επιτυχία στις εργασίες αυτής της διημερίδας.
Χαιρετισμός από την επικεφαλής τομέα εκπαίδευσης Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής, κυρία Πολίνα Μπιθαρά, ως εκπρόσωπος της Προέδρου της Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής για την UNESCO, κυρία Μαρία Εκατερίνη Παπακριστοπούλου Τζιτζικώστα.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Θα πω δύο λόγια αρχικά στα αγγλικά για τις ξένες κυρίες, πολύ συνοπτικά, και έπειτα θα απευθύνω το χαιρετισμό της Προέδρου. Dear Professor Hind, dear Professor Bernard, dear Ms. Tasic, it is a pleasure to be here amongst you. My name is Polina Bithara. I am the head of the section of education of the Hellenic National Commission for UNESCO, the official representative of UNESCO in Greece. I will be very brief because I'm sure that all of the things that I will mention you're very well aware of. UNESCO is working based on education as a vehicle for all of its fields. So for promotion of education, for the promotion of sustainable development, and of course the safeguarding of peace. Through a number of programs, networks, city networks based on creativity, networks of cities focusing on learning through the arts, through publications, through workshops, through a huge wealth of actions. We have a long-term network with the University of the Kapodician University of Athens. We fully support the initiative for the promotion and strengthening of the arts and the inclusion of the arts in education in all its forms. And we will be glad to cooperate with you individually and the organizations that you represent and the university. The relationship that we have with the university is ongoing, and will continue supporting this important initiative. Thank you very much. Και τώρα δύο λόγια στα ελληνικά. Ονομάζομαι Πολίνα Μπιθαρά, είμαι επικεφαλής του τομέα εκπαίδευσης της Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής για την UNESCO, που είναι ο επίσημος εκπρόσωπος της UNESCO στην Ελλάδα. Βρίσκομαι εδώ εκ μέρους της Προέδρου της Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής για την UNESCO, της κυρίας Εκατερίνης Τζιτζικώστα. Η UNESCO εργάζεται για την εκπαίδευση και την προώθηση του πολιτισμού, την προώθηση της επικοινωνίας και των επιστημών Ο πολιτισμός είναι ένας κέριος χώρος στην αποστολή του φορέα των Ηνωμένων Εθνών, με πάρα πολλές δράσεις, με εκδόσεις, με σεμινάρια, με δίκτυα πόλεων που επικεντρώνονται στον πολιτισμό και στη δημιουργικότητα, με σημαντική προσφορά και με πίστη ότι ο πολιτισμός σε όλες τις εκφάνσεις είναι ένα όχημα για την επίτευξη ειρήνης, για την επίτευξη της ισότητας των φύλων, του διαπολιτισμικού διαλόγου, της προσέγγισης των πολιτισμών. Είναι τεράστιο το εύρος των προγραμμάτων. Θα πω πολύ επιγραμματικά, θα αναφέρω επιγραμματικά εκτός από την προστασία της παγκόσμιας πολιτιστικής κληρονομιάς Υλικής και Άιλης, που είναι σημαντικός χώρος για την UNESCO και για την πρόθεση του πολιτισμού, θα δίνει μεγάλη έμφαση στην πρόθεση της πολιτιστικής ποικιλομορφίας, της σύγχρονης τέχνης, των δημιουργικών βιομηχανιών, την προστασία της ελευθερίας των καλλιτεχνών, της ψηφιακής τέχνης, της καινοτομίας, μέσω δικτύων όπως το δίκτυο creativities, που είναι ένα παγκόσμιο δίκτυο που προωθεί τον κινηματογράφο, την αρχιτεκτονική, τη γλυπτική και πολλές άλλες μορφές, ας πούμε, πολιτισμού. Η Εθνική Επιτροπή, όπως είπα και πριν, έχει μια διαχρονική σχέση με το Πανεπιστήμιο. Εξάλλου, Πρίτανής είναι μέλος του διοικητικού μας. Έχουμε συνεργαστεί σε πάρα πολλές δράσεις στο παρελθόν. Είμαστε εδώ για να στηρίξουμε περαιτέρω και να βοηθήσουμε και στη δικτύωση και στη διάχυση και της διακήρυξης, αλλά και των προτεραιοτήτων της συγκεκριμένης πρωτοβουλίας, που ενισχύει τη δημιουργικότητα και την κριτική σκέψη και συντείνει στην κινητοποίηση κυβερνήσεων και θεσμών για την υποστήριξη του πολιτισμού στην εκπαίδευση. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Καλή συνέχεια σε όλες τις δράσεις σας.
Χαιρετισμός από την πρώην Πρόεδρο της World Alliance for Art Education, κυρία Σάνια Τάσιτς.
Kalispera. It is a pleasure to come to Athens again on this amazing occasion that is a follow-up of one of the most important global summits of the World Alliance for Arts Education. I come here not only representing my association, IDEA, International Drama Theatre and Education Association, but also as one of the members of the Presidential Forum of WAAE, World Alliance for Arts Education, and I'm really sorry that our current chair of WAAE could not be present, Patricia Gonzalez, who is actually from Mexico, but all of my colleagues, also Mira Talio, who is the representative of INSEA, the Visual Arts Association for Arts Education, and also World Dance Alliance, Sarah Knox. Because Sarah, for example, lives in New Zealand, we couldn't connect and collect here again. For us, it is significant as an alliance that is put together for the cause of advocacy on the field of arts education, where we can prove that all together, all the different fields of arts education can work together, is to have meetings like this, conferences like this, and especially advocacy documents like the Athens Declaration. Many compliments have been given to the paper. It was a very, very dedicated work of the team from here, from Athens, from the university. And I want to thank Leos, Maro, Ilya, and Elisabeth, and everyone who is here. I probably forgot some more people, but even the people from UNESCO said that it is like the framework on culture and arts education in a nutshell. It is a condensed and well-elaborated document. And for us, it is so important to share it with the world and to remind the world what is happening. In October, I had the pleasure also to represent WAAE at Mondia Cult. This is the most important ministerial conference organized by UNESCO. It was in Barcelona. And of course, it was dedicated also, part of it, to the framework. But most of all, it was the presentation of the new document. I will have the opportunity to talk very little about it. It's very important because at last, it is something that Keleng, the representative of UNESCO, actually mentioned and promised while he was here in Athens in 2024 in October, but they delivered it at last autumn. So we have the guidance for the framework on culture and arts education. It's a very important and interesting document, and we should look upon it. Personally, I'm an artist and practitioner, but I realized that when you get into some age, you have to work on advocacy, and you have to work on sharing and allowing things to develop and have good conditions, financing, and a solid ground for the new generations that are coming. So this is our role. And I admire people from here, all the professors, all the students, everyone who have organized these two events for their dedication, because they look also towards the future, hoping that in the future there will be more arts education, there will be more art, that there will be more culture, everything that will oppose the chaos, destruction, and violence that seems to be happening everywhere. So this is our shield to protect humanity. And I really hope that we will keep this shield strong and that we will keep this flame burning as you have continued to keep it burning here in Athens with this conference. Thank you so much.
Χαιρετισμός από την καθηγήτρια του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, κυρία Σμαράγδα Χρυσοστόμου.
Αξιότιμη καθηγητά, κυρία Χιλέα Χαλδεάκη, μέλος του Συμβουλίου Διοίκησης του ΕΚΠΑ. Αξιότιμη κυρία Πιθαρά, επικεφαλής του τομέα εκπαίδευσης της Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής της UNESCO. Αξιότιμη κυρία Σάνια Τανσίτς, εκπρόσωπο της World Alliance for Arts Education. Αξιότιμη κυρία Πεφάνη, πρόεδρε του Τμήματος Θεατρικών Σπουδών. Αξιότιμες καθηγήτριες κυρία Παμ Μπέρναρντ και κυρία Κλέρ Χάιντ. Αξιότιμες και αξιότιμοι συνάδελφοι, εκπαιδευτικοί, καλλιτέχνες, αγαπητές φοιτήτριες, αγαπητοί φοιτητές. Με μεγάλη χαρά σας καλωσορίζω στη Διημερίδα με τίτλο Dialogues, Creativities and Collaborations in Art Education. Η εκδήλωση αυτή είναι κατά κάποιο τρόπο συνέχεια της 10ης Διεθνούς Συνόδου της Παγκόσμιας Συμμαχίας για τις Τέχνες στην Εκπαίδευση, World Alliance for Arts Education, με τις εξαιρετικές κεντρικές ομιλίες των προσκεκλημένων καθηγητριών από τη Μεγάλη Βρετανία και τα καλλιτεχνικά και διαθεματικά εργαστήρια που έχουν σχεδιάσει οι μοναδικοί συνεργάτες μας, η διημερίδα αυτή είναι μια γιορτή των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση. Είναι η επιβεβαίωση και η επίδειξη της σημασίας των τεχνών στη ζωή μας. Παρακολουθώντας τις εργασίες της διημερίδας, είμαι σίγουρη ότι θα συμφωνήσετε σε όλα τα σημεία που αναφέρονται στη διακήρυξη της Αθήνας, που βρίσκεται στο φάκελο που κρατάτε στα χέρια σας. Η διακήρυξη της Αθήνας είναι το αποτέλεσμα των διεργασιών της 10ης Συνόδου που πραγματοποιήθηκε στο Πανεπιστήμιο Αθηνών τον Οκτώβριο του 2024, όπως αναφέρθηκε ήδη από τον κύριο Χαλδεάκη και από την κυρία Τάσιτς, και των συζητήσεων και επακόλουθων διαβουλεύσεων με την UNESCO, την WAAE και με οργανισμούς και φορείς των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση. Κεντρικό σημείο αποτελεί η πίστη μας στη μετασχηματιστική δύναμη των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση, γι' αυτό και ζητάμε πρόσβαση όλων στην καλλιτεχνική εκπαίδευση, ενίσχυση της αυτονομίας της κάθε τέχνης και παράλληλα την ενσωμάτωσή της στην εκπαίδευση. Διεκδικούμε μεταρρυθμίσεις και επενδύσεις που θα στηρίξουν και θα προωθήσουν και θα χρηματοδοτήσουν την έρευνα, την καινοτομία και την εφαρμογή των προγραμμάτων. Και τέλος, καλούμε όλους τους πολιτικούς, τους εκπαιδευτικούς, τους καλλιτέχνες και όλες τις κοινότητες να ενωθούν μαζί μας για να καταστήσουμε τις τέχνες στην εκπαίδευση προσβάσιμες, πολύτιμες και αναπόσπαστο μέρος της μάθησης για όλους. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Χαιρετισμός από την αναπληρώτρια καθηγήτρια του Τμήματος Θεατρικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, κυρία Κλειό Φανουράκη.
Αξιότιμε κύριε Χαλδεάκη, μέλος του Συμβουλίου Διοίκησης του ΕΚΠΑ, αξιότιμη κυρία Μπιθαρά, επικεφαλής του Τομέα Εκπαίδευσης της Ελληνικής Εθνικής Επιτροπής για την UNESCO, αξιότιμη κυρία Τάνσιτς, πρώην πρόεδρο της WAAE, αξιότιμε πρόεδρε του Τμήματος Θεατρικών Σπουδών, καθηγητά κύριε Γιώργη Πεφάνη, αξιότιμες καθηγήτριες κυρία Παμ Μπερνάρ και Κλέρ Χάιντ, αξιότιμοι συνάδελφοι, αξιότιμοι και αξιότιμες φοιτητές, φοιτήτριες, συνάδελφοι, μέλη της εκπαιδευτικής κοινότητας και φίλοι και φίλες των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση, σας καλωσορίζουμε στη Βιωματική Διημερίδα «Διάλογοι, Δημιουργικότητες και Συνέργειες της Τέχνες στην Εκπαίδευση». Και σας ευχαριστούμε από καρδιάς για την παρουσία σας. Ευχαριστούμε θερμά τις Βρετανικές Αρχές και την Εταιρεία Αξιοποίησης και Διαχείρισης της Περιουσίας του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών για τη φιλοξενία και τη στήριξη της Διημερίδας, καθώς και για τη σταθερή στήριξη στο πεδίο των τεχνών στην εκπαίδευση. Ευχαριστούμε θερμά για τη στήριξη την Ελληνική Εθνική Επιτροπή για την UNESCO, με αφορμή τη διακήρυξη της Αθήνας, που με πολύ αγάπη δημιουργήσαμε σε συνεργασία με την WAAE, τα Τμήματα Μουσικών και Θεατρικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του ΕΚΠΑ και την UNESCO, σας προσκαλούμε όλες και όλους να κάνετε δημιουργική χρήση της διακήρυξης, δημιουργώντας χώρο και χρόνο για θέατρο, μουσική, χορό και εικαστικά ή για μουσική, χορό, εικαστικά και θέατρο, σε όλες τις βαθμίδες της εκπαίδευσης, στην τυπική και στη μη τυπική εκπαίδευση, σε όλες τις τάξεις, για όλες τις ηλικίες, στη διαβίου μάθηση, εντός και εκτός εκπαιδευτικών δομών, εντός και εκτός πολιτιστικών οργανισμών, εντός και εκτός των συνόρων, διατηρώντας ζωντανές τις διαπολιτισμικές γέφυρες, τις ρίζες και τις μνήμες. Στο πλαίσιο αυτού του διαπολιτισμικού διαλόγου, έχουμε την τιμή να προσκαλέσουμε στο βήμα ως κεντρική ομιλήτρια της πρώτης ημέρας των εργασιών της Διημερίδας, την καθηγήτρια κυρία Κλέρ Χάιντ από το York St. John University. Ως κεντρική ομιλήτρια, λίγα λόγια για την Κλέρ Χάιντ. Στο φάκελο θα βρείτε αναλυτικά τα βιογραφικά και των δύο κεντρικών ομιλητριών. Η Κλέρ Χάιντ είναι καθηγήτρια σύγχρονου χορού και performance στο Πανεπιστήμιο York St. John και είναι υπεύθυνη για την έρευνα στο μεταπτυχιακό και στο διδακτορικό κύκλο σπουδών της Σχολής Καλών Τεχνών. Οι μέθοδοι της συνδέουν την περιπατητική δράση, τη δημιουργική γραφή και την performance. Έχει παρουσιάσει το έργο της σε διεθνές επίπεδο και έχει διατελέσει επισκέπτρια ερευνήτρια στο Ινστιτούτο Καλών Τεχνών του Σικάγο, στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Ρίο, στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Νέας Υόρκης και στην Ακαδημία Θεάτρου της Νορβηγίας. Ο τίτλος της ομιλίας της κυρίας Χάιντ είναι «Field Day, Night Tone». Dear Professor Hind, thank you for being here with us tonight. The floor of the University of Athens is yours.
Hello, everybody. I just want to say a big thank you to you for inviting me here to the university. It's a real privilege, actually. With so much pressure on the arts at the moment, it feels a really exciting time to be with colleagues and students and people that I worked with last night in the workshop, to be active and be creative. So it fills me with joy, and Athens is an extraordinary city, and I'm privileged to be in this beautiful building, so thank you very much. So Cleo has introduced me, so I won't introduce myself too much, only to say that I am quite fluid with my practice as an academic, as a teacher, a researcher, a performer, and a creative writer, and the postgraduate research director for our School of the Arts in York. So it basically means that I direct the PhD program for all of the for the whole of the school. So I am fluid. I move back and forth between these spaces, but I wouldn't be able to teach. I wouldn't be able to work with students at undergraduate level, MA level, postgraduate level, if I wasn't practicing myself as a practicing artist. So I firmly believe that to be in education within the arts, for me anyway, it's important that I'm always practicing. So I'm going to be sharing some of my practice with you this evening. I've been really active. I was very, very active before the pandemic in a particular type of work. I had like a 20-year history of live performance with engaged audiences. The work was for stage and outside in urban spaces, in city spaces, and I toured internationally with city work. Looking at this theme of, I'm just going to move back 2 slides, of what it means to embody the dead. I'd done a PhD in play in 2010, and I was looking at different types of play attitudes that we have in life. And post-PhD, I started to work with an artist called Gary Winters, and together we started to make work on the sort of subject of death and play, but from the perspective of the celebration of the life that was, and how we as human beings can't let go of the dead, that the dead are always with us. So that was a very playful exploration that I had with Gary for 10 years, and we created a book here called Embodying the Dead. And I'm proud of this book because it is a book of practice, and it works well in education because it's a practitioner's point of view of making theatre with philosophical concepts as well as practical tasks. But we just were about to launch it. We were about to go on tour with work, live performance work that related to the book, and we went into the pandemic. We went into a restricted period of movement, into what we called lockdown. I'm not sure how that translates across, but I've never really experienced a silence like it. And what I mean by that is I'd always been interested conceptually in silence. I'd supervised a PhD through to completion, a student called Linda Marshall-Griffiths, who's a BBC radio playwright. I'd supervised her work on the dramaturgy of silence. I was always keen and always really interested in these spaces that we conceive, because we can ask the question, is there ever any such thing as silence? And, is silence a metaphor? Is it a marker of time? And I'm just thinking to British theatre, particularly the work of Harold Pinter, who has 3 different types of silence: the ellipses, which is the 3 dots as you're tripping over speech, the pause, which is what it is, and the silence. And when you see the word silence in a Harold Pinter play, it will give you a change of drama. So these beautiful spaces, these conceptual spaces that are written into dramatic texts, always really fascinated me. And Linda produced her PhD on the dramaturgies of silence, even though she was broadcasting in radio. Now, in radio, you can't have dead air. There's no such thing as silence. It's not permitted because people will tune out. So the concept of silence was in her character. She needed silence for her characters. She needed to write silence into her text because her texts were poetic and they had pauses and breaks and beats. And I encouraged her to think about silence for her literature review as a creative alternative to a literature review, where she created a typology of silences, of an A to Z of the many different types of silences that you can have or experience in theatre and performance. But coming back to my interest in silence, the pandemic gave me a new type of silence that I'd never witnessed before. And I think we all, perhaps to a degree, experienced the same. There was a weight to it, almost like the same weight you would feel in a Beckett play, that sort of really moved me. And many of us could hear the birds again, and many of us were connecting to nature in the pandemic. My practice, because of the type of practice I was doing, could have been non-existent, but I could have just gone online, because that was the temptation, that was the alternative, and I was certainly teaching online, like the most of us. But instead, I turned to nature, and I began to listen and tune into environments. And I realised I'm in a privileged position because of my job. Not everybody has these exciting experiences of going and connecting to nature if you're not close to nature. So I realised that I am in that privileged position. I have family in North Wales by the mountains that I could visit when we were allowed to visit, wave at the door, wave through the window. And then near me, where I live, on the North Yorkshire coast, there's an extraordinary geological landscape that I would visit on a regular basis. I also lost a really good friend, two of us in the room knew well, Professor Noel Witts, during the pandemic. And Noel was a professor of mine when I was a student, and we ended up being colleagues. And he was a really inspirational professor, really, who was playful and light and extremely interested in students and education. So the pandemic for all of us was a really difficult time. That's a given. But I think there are paradoxes within the pandemic that brought something else for some of us to the forefront. So this talk, Field Day Night Tone, takes you through some examples of my practice-led research that I submit to the university's assessment panel for high-quality research to be submitted on behalf of the university to what we call the UK's Research Excellence Framework. So whatever I do practice-wise within my job gets measured and assessed to be submitted for a score to be graded. And the Research Excellence Framework is the UK system for assessing the excellence of research in higher education. The REF outcomes are used to inform the allocation of around £2 billion per year of public funding for universities' research. I need to be honest, I'm not looking at this statement as an artist when I'm making work. I need to make the work that I'm driven to make, but I find ways of being strategic on reflection of the work I've made to suit the brief and the criteria that they're looking for. So I will talk about my practice, and then I will move on with a few examples of the kind of practice-led research PhDs that we have in our school. So Field Day is not the name of a project, it's a concept that I have about connecting to landscape. And I understand the natural environment through sensory activity, of walking to seek out extraordinary shapes in the natural landscape, to rest and hold a rock, to wrap body around geological rock, moulding into a body's shape, to a boulder shape, and squeezing into scars. Blending with the shape of the natural temporal landscape, I practice deep listening, where, to paraphrase artist I own, I hear words forming in my mind as sounds. Wearing a green dress, petticoat, and hiking boots, I claim an aesthetic that is different from the image of a human conquering a summit. I read lines, cracks, splits, dents. I feel a rock's texture, temperature, and imagine their vibrations. My intuitive self listens and attunes to the landscape through touch. Pauline Oliveras' deep listening practice understands the world as a complex matrix of vibrating energy, matter and air. And she says, just as we are made of vibrations, vibration connects us to all beings and connects us to all things independently. So I found deep listening lets everything in. It does not need to be an immediate silence to do this work. It includes my own thoughts and things that bother me, the weights of modern life, and I've learnt to let these in. Yet the noise eventually disappears as I channel the sound a rock makes when I work. When writing spoken word, performance from this experience, acknowledging the breaking, fracturing, sculpting, renewing of systems, geological and textual, the collapsing, exploding, fading, and expanding of processes, cosmological and vocal. What I'm saying is, I map geological processes. I map geological processes to my creative writing practices and cosmological understandings of the universe to my performance to voice delivery. As a dramaturgical process, this enables me to write creative material from the practice of deep listening to rocks. And then, of course, there are other things that surface from consciousness, the flashback to a dream, the digressions of the theme, the realization we're on a rock, spinning, hurtling through space. Certainly, mountains and very large rocks do vibrate. We can't hear the sound, but it is there. The earth has a tone and can be recorded with seismic equipment. Therefore, my body is a field recorder, collecting the sounds of the natural environment, interpreting what the body feels as it touches, letting imagination take over. So I've been researching geology too, so the practice of holding and molding the rock is a sort of embodied practice of understanding the geological formation, the age and the history of the material that I was connecting to. The scientific interest coupled with the physical connection of body to boulder enhanced the embodied experience. I was in touch with what seems impossible to know, the processes of imperceptible movements, slow movements that are happening now in Earth, with Earth. Of course, the sensory practice is not original. As a Western artist, I acknowledge non-Western and indigenous practices that have gone back thousands and thousands of years. But I'm speaking of a woman who was fascinated by natural landscapes with a fond childhood memory of walking, and the fact that this practice began in the pandemic. There was a real consciousness to it, when we could no longer perform or gather audiences anywhere. It was a profound time of change, and although it looks like I'm alone in these images, I collaborate with a non-professional photographer. These images are taken on an iPhone from my daughter, actually, who at the time, fragile and 15, scared stiff of the world in front of her. She was taking her GCSEs and everything, like all the other children of that experience, felt the weight of what it meant to experience this the stopping of something. But walking together in these natural landscapes, I felt like I was educating her and she was educating me. We were sort of working together collaboratively. My daughter doesn't like performing. She really, really doesn't want to be a performer, but she really likes the idea of taking photographs of this performer in a green dress. So she took that project on and came up with some of the ideas together. It was a place for us to play. And I look back at that time now, and it was a real sacred space, even though it was a really terrifying time, because there was just the two of us. And I did have a fear of getting COVID, and I worried about her, but the two of us sort of found this really beautiful space creatively, with a discussion of our love for the natural environment and the universe and our place as women within it. So the practice enabled me to process those thoughts and feelings, to tell stories. I wrote stories for live performance and lyrics for electronic dance music, which I will return to later. I worked with Oliveras' practice of deep listening to inform writing of creative content. What comes to the surface of deep listening are notes in my mind, imagination, body, all over my senses, where memory and thoughts on deep time coalesce, where I map them into a form designed for the page, meant to be spoken, the voice channeling Earth's acoustic energies as a concept for sounding, the filtering process of choosing the words go through a process of formation and erosion. Stay with me. In practice, the body settles with rock. It begins to mimic the folds and peaks of the natural world as she gathers thoughts. There's a kind of attention required for earth listening, holding, resting, sensing, opening, falling in love with boulders. Closing ocean, explosive processes, erosion and recent glacial melts meet her fluffy green petticoat, dress and boots. As a child, she walked weakly here, captivated by invisible forces that spoke to her imagination and from out of the mountain. She's wild, and you can find her in the Glidderau, the name deriving from the Welsh word clydur, meaning heap of stones. Chunk of granite, formed from melt, composed of quarks, the stuff of feldspar, cool to touch, distinctively crushed, reconstituted, pressured, once a mountain, now a rock, tumbling out of a cliff face below the Minack, sharp as anything, cool to touch. Stay a while as the body settles into beautiful feelings, love. Complex slicken slides of the fault and crush, styrations of the shatter zone. Cool is the atop drift of exotic, erratic, from northern lands of Scandinavia. Faulting and folding, vertical chalk, coccoliths of a golgi body, the microscopic skeletons laid down ever so slowly, tickle me as I rest, settled. What does it feel like within the folds, layers, and openings of the honeyed, sculptured, weathered cliffs, protecting ground? Feels like falling, little pieces of electric falling in. Britain is one of the least nature-connected nations in the world, with Nepal the first. This is an article I found in The Guardian, but research has been conducted on measuring how cities, particularly urban areas, do or do not connect to nature. Nature connectedness isn't just low in a few places, it's systematically lower in wealthier, more urbanized, business-orientated societies. And that matters because nature connectedness is linked to our well-being, pro-environmental behaviour, and ultimately the health of our planet. It's getting darker. The light is fading, and I am moving into a practice of quantum listening, and with the night. Quantum listening is listening to more than one reality simultaneously, changing and being changed by the listening. In the daylight, on a summer's evening, walk to a clearing surrounded by trees where there is a gentle breeze, and if possible, look for ancient species. Lay down and listen. The wind plays woodland like percussion. Low-pitched note, dropping like a bass, moves through thicker leaves, high notes follow, tickling all tops. Tune into the furthest tree, stay a while, it's holding you. Sounds blend into your inner style, moving through your body. The closest tree is calling out, along with gentle flutters now, followed by grand crescendos, shedding like falling stars, love. Tightly packed, overlapping leaf clusters create vibrant movements when hanging on flexible bows. Fall in love with silence. Trees wait to be played in stillness. The light fades, woods darken, eyes adjust to the night. One by one, stars appear, complementing the beauty of twigs. Stay a while. The trees announce the faint appearance of dusty band-like clouds. Hold your gaze to see the pale white glow, dark patches, globular clusters, and your own internal monologue. On another occasion, walk to moorland and find a lone tree. Lay down and listen to a solo for a meteor. I've been inviting several artists to walk with me and PhD students at the university to walk at night and collaborate in the dark and be creative together. Artists and students who are filmmakers, performers, composers, and cultural geographers. I'm going to highlight one of these projects that I've been leading on for women. So I've been working with lots of different people, but I want to highlight one project I've been working with for women in a national dark sky reserve, connecting with the universe, with women who historically and politically, who want to walk in historically and politically exclusive places. I invited a cultural geographer, Dr. Jenny Hall from the University of York St John, to collaborate with me and walk with a charity called the Kira Women's Project, who I invited on the walks. Kira are a registered charity that help local women make positive changes in their lives. So they work with the service because there is a specific need, for whatever reason, from their own life experiences, to access safe spaces and support from the charity. So our night walks, I've been doing these regularly, are to inspire creativity together with the women. The significance of the research demonstrates how sensory walking practices build inclusive spaces for women to walk under dark skies. And we ask these research questions. How can dark sky reserves create spaces of inclusion and challenge social and cultural perceptions through walking with women at night? What sensory practices and skills facilitate women walking in dark sky reserves? Now, we're looking at two different pieces of research, those two questions, but also understanding this, that light pollution has devastating effects on all living things, particularly human health. It's estimated that over 90% of the population in North America and Europe live beneath light, polluted skies. The loss of dark skies has become an urgent political concern due to the impact of climate crisis and the loss of access for 80% of the global population who are unable to see the Milky Way. So when we took the women out on the walks, we worked with deep listening theory, going below the surface of what is heard, inviting all the senses to be engaged in a listening process. In the United Kingdom, there are 7 internationally recognized protected dark sky reserves in national parks, where the night sky is unobstructed by light pollution. The North York Moors National Park has established a dark sky public engagement program to facilitate visitor and community awareness in dark sky conservation. The North York Moors National Park has a vision that everyone should be confident to visit and enjoy national parks. And the Dark Sky Festival recently celebrated its 10th anniversary of activities and events and education activities for all, encouraging people to visit the national parks and experiencing them at night. But Barker emphasises that public parks are often perceived as unsafe, for women particularly, limiting their nighttime access to green spaces. Their research highlights that sexual harassment in public areas affects 71% of women in the UK, underlining the need for safer park designs for women and girls. So Jenny and I wanted to ensure that our walks were designed for the women to be together, to experience a national park at night, and have an opportunity to be creative, imaginative, play, and from the experiences of connecting to nature. Given the reality of women's experiences, which often include fear of objectification, compounded by cultural history, ghosts, myths, somebody lurking in a bush, the fear that we have, we were concentrating more on how we connect to nature, trying to alleviate those fears. We set off onto the moors from the light and into the dark, and our eyes adjusted. And the eyes do adjust. We take head torches, but only use them when we need them. Therefore, we suggested that our visibility as women sits within a bigger question. How can we confidently connect to nature in the vast infinite space of the universe and understand dark skies through walking experiences? Jenny and I did test walks together first. The night felt alive and the smells were strong. We noticed that our bodies adjusted to accommodate the lack of light, and we tested how long we could walk without using a head torch. From the experience of witnessing the colours fade and the stars coming into view, we told each other stories related to our interest in the night sky. We shared our amateur astronomical knowledge. Our experiment, combining walking art with sensory ethnography, allowed us to create an immersive experience in the dark. We examined the challenges of walking at night. We found the body's adaptation from twilight to darkness heightened our awareness of the nocturnal landscape, fostering a sense of confidence and connectedness. This deepened our sensitivity to the transition from day to night, such as the shift from daytime to nighttime bird calls and other things that sort of come into view. By avoiding artificial light, we reduced our environmental impact and embraced a just way to experience dark skies. As we walked, various themes emerged related to sensory experiences, emotions, gender, behaviors, and nature connection. Silence helped us appreciate touch, sound, and smell, while recording the physical skills for navigating challenging terrain. We also observed how the transition from day to night prepares the body for darkness, alleviating fears related to movement, falling, and perceptual dangers lurking in the shadows. We collate, for the research, we collate information from all the women that join us anonymously and ask them questions on the walk about the experience. One person said, "The reality for women is we don't feel safe walking alone at night." I also think it's very much morally loaded. You know, a woman alone at night just sounds out of place. Historically, when you look at it, it's just not a normal thing or accepted or approved. Historically, I think all cultures, our bodies, are not the norm for public spaces. We are always associated with domestic space, staying inside, and men have been ruling public spaces forever. So I think we feel apologetic for being out in public space alone at night. We feel ashamed, maybe a little scared that we're talking in that space. Walking as a group, this is one of the insights that Jenny and I uncovered on the research. Walking as a group removed barriers engaging in rural landscapes at night, barriers of accessibility, fear of the unknown, being hurt from falling, and all allayed through the shared experience of learning new skills, such as navigating rough, broken ground in the darkness, trusting night vision, and employing little-used sun senses, such as hearing, to walk safely. And this created a sense of inclusion for women who had previously experienced or felt safe to walk, hadn't felt safe to walk in rural spaces at night. And then we asked for creative responses by way of spoken word, poetry, in a workshop outside in the dark. There, and this is from Sabah Zavareh, a British-based artist from Iran. There, further away, fox and owl and deer are staring at me through the dark. We have this amazing physicist called Chanda Prescott Weinstein who tries to get us to think about how we view the universe differently. And she says, access to a dark night sky to see and be inspired by the universe as it really is should be a human right, not a luxury for the chosen few. And one of the women from the charity drew an image of their experience. Breathing in nature, she said, no longer screaming alone. My worries and cares and stress in life have flown away into the dark sky. That project has enabled me to get a bursary, to get some funding to offer a PhD place to an artist that wants to work with women in the future. I'll go back to this slide, sorry, because I'm distracting. That's the next project. So we have at the university an Institute for Social Justice, and I applied to our Institute for Social Justice for funding for a 3-year PhD and advertised for a PhD student to work with me on projects for women, walking and creativity, and we got that funding. And Tiana has started now, she's in her first year of a PhD, and she lives in London, and she's taking women out on regular walks, and that's forming the practice of her PhD. And her PhD is a practice-led one, which means that both the practice itself is examined as well as the thesis. So the examiner will need to be at a few of the walks leading up to the viva. Or if she presents a performance, which she might very well do on the subject, the examiner needs to be at the performance, as with all of our PhDs. And then they are asked to also write a 50,000-word maximum thesis. So both the practice and theory thesis are weighted together. They're not separate. It's one practice-led PhD. And it was the same when I did my
PhD. It was practice-led. My practice was leading the inquiry. The things that I was doing led the questions and enabled the theory to come to light. I did not start with theory. I started with practice as an artist, and through rummaging and feeling my way into the practice and understanding the practice and it becoming embodied, I then start to make inquiries, theoretical inquiries. The next inquiry, which I'm really excited about, I'm in an electronic dance band called the Long Dead Stars, and it is myself and a beautiful composer called Robert Willsmore, Dr. Robert Willsmore. And it brings in my connection to nature through walking and moulding my body with rock and my dark sky experiences, but it's evolved into an exciting music collaboration. So we are the Long Dead Stars. We like the idea that 80% of our bodies are made up of the same atoms that you would find in a dead star, in an exploding supernova, that all of our human atoms in our body, 80% is the same as a exploding supernova. And I know I'm not a physicist, I'm an artist, but in a way, I don't mind being an amateur in science. I think scientists can learn a lot from artists, and I would really love to see more of that happening, where scientists are working together with artists to understand artistic processes and how we connect and understand and access scientific understandings of space and geology. So we're a fusion of poetry and dance music about rocks and stars, composing lyrics from a blend of science, walking, and art. We are two artists, myself and Robert Willsmore. I write the lyrics, mainly spoken word, and I offer melodies to Rob, and Rob composes it on his Ableton Live system. For example, one of the songs that we wrote sort of reflects these beautiful little feather stars. I don't know whether anyone has ever seen these. These are tiny fossils, beautifully shaped as stars, and they drop off a crinoid, which is a creature that attached itself to the underside of sinking driftwood, and it's fossilized, and it's broken off. The stem is broken off, and they form these beautiful stars. So the creature is called a crinoid, and they're nicknamed feather stars, and they're 200 million years old, and they predate the dinosaur. And there are thousands of them in the on the beach on the North Yorkshire coast where I've been rock hugging, and they're beautiful. So we've been sort of just mesmerized by the tiny little things on the ground and the tiny little things in the sky. And it sounds really cliche, but actually what we've been doing, it's what we've been doing with it that matters. Because of course there'll be lots of musicians in the room, and there's lots of musicians at the university and lots of artists. I think it's what we actually do with the research, what we actually do with our arts practice, that I think is really important. So that's me and Rob. But what we've been doing is, because of my experience of dark sky walking, we've been doing live performances in the dark, in the middle of moorland, in the middle of a natural environment, taking our audiences on hikes, and then we set up, and then we perform a gig outside whilst you can dance under the dark skies. I can give you just a little tiny, I mean, I've got a Spotify thing here. This is a banger. This is like a, bear with me. We do fast dance music. Hold on. Bear with me. Hold on, not that one. This one.
Tectonic heart, I want to be your rock, to be your rock, slipping on the fault line.
And then the spoken word comes in. The reason I'm sharing that one is that we were mesmerized because we got 27,000 listeners for that song. And it's something I've never done before, try and put things out to get that many likes or listens. But for us, it's really important because we're writing love songs about rocks and stars and the environment. So if we get 27,000 listeners interested in nature, then that feels like our work is being disseminated a bit more wider than the arts education system. Now, I get measured for the Research Excellence Framework on how my research is disseminated. And that is a key sort of note in my keynote tonight is whatever it is that you're doing, whatever arts practice that you're working in education, sometimes it can sit within education, and the people that are reading your work in journal articles or in books are the people that will gravitate towards you because they're interested in your subject matter, because they work in your fields or they're studying. But how do you reach the wider audience? What can you do to disseminate your work so you get other people interested in education? We are under pressure in the UK, actually, for theatre and drama subjects. We're hearing on we hear on a regular basis schools stopping teaching drama at secondary school level. If they continue to do that, we won't have a sort of lifeline of young people interested in coming to university to be creative and perform and be artists. So whilst the Research Excellence Framework assessment might be a bit of a challenge to us because we need to prove our research worth, what it can do is allow you to think about who your wider audience can be. How do you make work that for everybody, people that sit outside your normal circle, even sit outside the theatre or the concert hall that you usually play? And what Rob and I have found with the Long Dead Stars is we've attracted crowds and audiences that have become really fond of nature and arts and what that means to combine the two. We composed a track called Dancing Under Dark Skies, and we took a group of walkers to the highest point of the North Yorkshire Moors at the Dark Skies Festival on Blakey Ridge. The work was written for the festival, specifically for that first experience, and we invited 30 walkers to join us on a dark sky walk across rural terrain to the high moor, where we all listened and danced to the song. We listened with silent disco headphones. Oolitic, shelly limestone of bivalves, crinoid and stuff that is nicknamed nabs, corallian stuff that is nicknamed nabs, sit under the dark sky where the moon is at apogee. The moon is at apogee when it's farthest from Earth. Oolitic, shelly earth stuff of crinoid grit, sit under the dark sky where a bright thing called Sirius is nicknamed dog. The geological environment of the North Yorkshire Moors has a subterranean history that is mixed with rock formations deposited from its later glacial history. Geologists chart the time period of change using exceptionally interesting language for spoken word artists and the list of groups that define a Jurassic epoch, the Quaternary period, such as the Great Oolite group, Corallian group, the delicious words, velvety to speak. The lyrics of the song are just as much about the relationship between the rock and the ground and the stars in the sky as they are about humans' innate need to tell stories and name and rename things, and how meaning is found and historicized through storytelling. The lyrics are also a commentary on how incomprehensible deep time is. and how we mark ourselves within that time, and how we see ourselves and our ancestors in the skies. The story of the song is a literal mapping of the night sky above, visualizing the dancers on a high moor on that specific date of the premiere. The position of the moon, the constellation of the stars, nebulae, and what can be seen with the naked eye. We are losing the ability to see the stars with the naked eye, especially in cities. We don't disturb the darkness. The head torches, they're very, very low lights, red. One can dance in freedom, unseen apart from the bobbing star-like headphones. One can listen in freedom. The music is tonal, that is, it has a hierarchy built on the same principles as all fundamental physics in the universe. The frequency doubles to the octave above, triples to the fifth above that, quadruples to the octave above that, and so on. To listen under the stars is to listen to the universe while watching parts of the universe that are furthest away so that we can see them with our naked eye. We listen on all levels simultaneously. Pauline Oliveros writes, "Quantum listening is the ability to discern all that there is in a single moment, and that all that there is borderless difference." The long dead stars are not placard-bearing climate change activists, and we're not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not what we are. But we do see ourselves as advocates for kindness towards human and the more than human, encompassing a world that is more than human. Rocks, be it would-be mudstone, sandstone or siltstone, are to be respected as two are black holes, to be admired, to be raised and praised in song and dance. Our music and words are meant to take you physically to move, to make you emotionally risen and intellectually swirled. A recent panel at the University of York St John called Cities Under Dark Skies at York St John University are asking in what ways can we, or more people, be engaged in caring for the planet in direct relation to the growing light pollution in our cities that is harming our wildlife, harms the tiniest creatures, to the birds that sing during the night because the LED lights are so bright, the birds assume it's daylight. A member of the panel reminded us all of the image of the polar bear on one piece of ice, relating to that image as giving us anxiety. She said, we all feel anxiety when we see that image. We all feel anxiety when we hear the words climate change. She gave thanks to the long dead stars. We'd just performed a set, declaring that our songs are love songs about rocks and stars. She quoted us by saying, maybe this is how we get everybody tuned back into the planet, with the care, the love, and the creative attention. Excuse me, not the anxiety, but the playfulness. So I'm going to go back to this one. So, practice-led research. How do you know which bit of the practice that you're doing is research? I think one of the simplest ways for me to try and understand this is to think about what are revelations within the practice itself, what has come to surface because of the practice. And to summarize, I mean, in a way, we'd say to our PhD students, when you're working in practice, what insights do you bring from this practice, from the work you've been working with for such a long time? Because a PhD, don't forget, is usually around five years in total, 4 to 5 years. You know, what insights do you have to share? And again, PhDs are about dissemination. All practices research should be about dissemination and educating others. So I've been revealing hints of revelations for me in my practice throughout. But the rock work gave me, as a creative writer, a process of working, and it gave me a language and a vocabulary. What it gave me, as I recall those moments, for delivery, for performance, It gave me a style and a specific attitude. And importantly, it gave me a voice. And I think my gender has a lot to offer in that world too. It's given me a deep time to consider, of deep play, of listening. It's taught me how to listen, and I think there are different ways of listening and tuning in to everything, to people, to places, to work, to practice. How do we listen? In what ways are we good listeners? I've tried my hardest in the last 5 years or maybe more of my practice not to, when I lecture, never to tell people what to do or preach. I've really stepped back from that because I haven't found it useful for myself. Whereas I'm fine in sharing the things that I've revealed with my practice because I think that enables other people to then make their own inquiries of the practice that they want to make. Because I like to imagine how others receive the practice, my own practice, and get the feedback from what they've perceived and how they've engaged in it, which helps me reflect on the shape of the work moving forward. Also learned that women can walk in the dark safely and be inspired when walking with other women. The project wasn't a case of let's go out and walk alone. I don't think any of us would feel safe, any of us, no matter what gender, would feel safe on our own. But the women that I was working with particularly had traumatic lives to a certain degree, and it was something that they had never done in their life, to walk in the dark in a rural area. And it just very simply made them feel liberated and contributed to their well-being. The Long Dead Stars is a playful collaboration, but it's taught me how to work with a musician, because I wasn't trained as a musician. But it's also taught me how to write love songs about rocks. All love songs usually are about human-to-human relationships, breaking hearts and falling in and out of love and being lonely. But these are songs about rocks. And what this tells me about my practice is that embodied knowledge is exceptionally important in practice-led research. And embodied knowledge for me is about repetition, of practicing, of going back to the same practice. And I have a metaphor of burrowing down, keep burrowing down to excavate an idea and a project, rather than having lots of ideas spreading out wide. Keep digging. What can you find if you keep going down and down? What comes up for you? And stay with it for a little while. My PhDs that I'm working with at the moment stumble upon keeping on the same track. And one of the questions that they ask me on a regular basis is, how do you not get bored of the same project? So I'm doing a PhD in a specific method or a specific theme, specific idea. But I've been doing it for 6 months now, and I want to move on to something else. And I'm saying, well, that's not a PhD. You've got to find a practice that enables you to stay with it and to render it and find processes of keeping it alive. And I also use the metaphor of a train line. Stay on the track. Don't come off the track. Don't go to a different town. Stay on the same line and keep heading forward. And writing is editing. When you're writing about the work and reflecting on it, that you must find a way of finding your own voice and your own process. So to come back to my PhD, Linda Marshall-Griffiths, the BBC radio playwright, she wrote a typology of silence. You can find her PhD online. It is brilliant. Her practice was 2 radio plays, Orpheus and Eurydice, an adaptation that she wrote for radio, and The Sky is Wider. And her literature review was a creative review. It was an A to Z of silences, which capture all of the things that she was doing in her practice. And And I would urge you, if you are supervising PhDs, or if you want to do a PhD yourself, or you're just interested in Linda's work, do give it a read. So to finish, thinking about this fluidity that I'm involved with of being a maker, the world that I'm involved with in education and the engagement that I have with students and staff is sort of fed by the practice that I'm doing on a regular basis. And it's part of my identity, and it's how and why I'm in arts education. So, and for me, dissemination and sharing is key. Thank you.